You know, one of the most interesting topics I like to explore would be the Uchiha Massacre. The massacre was to Sasuke what the Nine-Tails attack was to Naruto, but we all know it never had to happen. It's one of the things I like to call a causal nexus in the Naruto-verse. Just as Madara said, we can't escape cause and effect, which serves as the basic philosophy of all these what-ifs we do. In this story, we explored what would have happened if Shisui had managed to counter Danzo's attack. How would things have changed, or would they have changed at all? That was the question posed here. And now, for your viewing pleasure, we've compiled all three parts together into a single feature film. I hope you enjoy it. Now, let's get into it. But before we do, welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you're subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Shisui was rushing through the darkened streets under cover of night. Itachi had just told him that there was another meeting at the Naka Shrine. It seemed that things were coming to a head. Today was the day that Shisui planned to set things right. With the power of his Mangekyo Sharingan, he could quell the descent of his clan in a peaceful and bloodless manner. All it would take is a quick glance and a simple command similar to remain loyal to Konoha to end this talk of a coup. But as he passed through the village, his mind set on the plan he and Itachi had formulated together, he suddenly stopped. An elderly man stood before him. At first, Shisui was not aware of who this was, but as the man stepped closer, he passed through the light. It was then that Shisui noticed. "Oh, Lord Danzo, what are you doing here?" Danzo continued stepping forward. With every step, Shisui felt a feeling in his gut that this man was about to do something bad. No, Danzo surely wouldn't, would he? As he looked into the squinted eyes of the man who stood as the de facto leader of the Anbu, he began to feel uneasy. As I asked before, what are you doing here, Lord Danzo reached out to take Shisui's eyes. Immediately, Shisui jumped back in surprise. "What are you doing?" he cried out, just barely dodging the attack. It was a good thing that Shisui had his guard up. If he hadn't, he wasn't certain that he could have seen, reacted, and escaped this attack. But thankfully, his gut told him to be ready to move, and the moment his Sharingan saw Danzo's hand begin to go, his body flicker technique came into play. He stood there as suddenly the rest of the squad that Danzo had chosen to assist him in the matter surrounded him. As the shinobi rushed in, so too had Danzo. However, before he could do anything, Danzo seemingly teleported behind Shisui. Shisui sensed this, but instead of turning, he stepped forward and got into a fighting position. Danzo missed his attack and was left facing him. The other Anbu attacked. Shisui began to wonder if he could beat them at all. No, there was something else that he could do. His Mangekyo Sharingan activated. He began issuing a command. "The plan will work. Let's give Shisui a chance." He cast Kodo Amatsukami, and suddenly Danzo stopped. He looked around at his Anbu escort. "Hold!" Each member of the Anbu turned to look at their commander. Danzo thought about it for a moment. "Shisui, if I let you go, will you ensure that the Uchiha never rise against Konoha?" Shisui nodded. "Yes, my lord." Danzo seemed satisfied. He let out a long sigh. "Fine. Just see to it that they cause us no more issues." Shisui suppressed a smile and offered a slight bow to show respect. He then began heading back home without a word. He was surprised that it took to Danzo. He expected Danzo to be able to handle it, considering how many Sharingan he had tucked away in his sleeve. But Shisui assumed that because they were all covered by a bandage, they likely didn't notice him activating Kodo Amatsukami. Now that this was done, he began to meet up with Itachi at the river. "Are you ready to end this tonight?" Shisui sat there and looked down for a moment, sorrowfully. "Uh-oh, what's wrong?" Itachi asked. "We're still planning to do this, aren't we?" Shisui looked to Itachi. "I can't do it tonight," he said. Itachi was stunned. "Wait, what?" Shisui began to explain. "My left Mangekyo is practically useless to me. It can only cast Kodo Amatsukami once every 10 years. Wish I'd known that before I tried it. And as for my right Mangekyo, I can only cast it once per day, and I already had to use it today, so I literally cannot cast Kodo Amatsukami today even if I wanted to." "Shisui, I don't know how many more chances we're gonna get to stop this. My father and the rest of the clan are getting very hyped up about it, and it seems like there's only a limited time before they snap," Itachi said. "I'm sorry," Shisui said, attempting to avoid eye contact. Itachi sighed and lowered his head, shaking it. "Why did you cast it today anyway?" Shisui began to explain. "I was on my way here when I was stopped by Danzo and the rest of the Anbu. Danzo apparently doesn't think our plan will work. He's scared of our potential. He tried to take the Mangekyo Sharingan from me. As a last resort, I had to cast Kodo Amatsukami on Danzo and the other members of the Anbu just to get out of there. Itachi was shocked. I knew Danzo was messed up, but I didn't know he would go that far. Shisui nodded. Itachi took a deep breath to calm down and then let it out slowly. Well, it's not the end of the world. All we need to do is pray that this is not the last meeting before the raid. Shisui nodded. Together, they both attended the meeting in the shrine. There was much clamoring going on. It seemed that things were reaching a boiling point. Fugaku, standing before everyone, flanked on either side by his aides, spoke. Quiet! The entire clan seemed to turn down the volume. Fugaku then began to speak. It seems that we've reached an impasse with Konoha. It doesn't seem like they're willing to change anything for our sakes. Our only recourse is a coup. Itachi and Shisui grew very afraid upon hearing that. Please don't let this be the last meeting, Itachi said. As they listened in, they kept making it sound like the coup was just around the corner. It was then that Fugaku announced that they were preparing their plans. Itachi and Shisui looked at each other in terror. Shisui raised his hand. Fugaku stopped mid-sentence when he saw it. Other men turned around to face him as well. The crowd parted so that Fugaku and Shisui could see each other face to face. What is it, Shisui? Fugaku asked. Shisui then spoke. We can't do it just yet. Fugaku listened in. And why is that? This is a big decision, Shisui said. We can't make it rashly. We're talking about mass treason against our own village. A coup. The removal of officials and replacement with a new regime. People will die. Fugaku nodded. Indeed. But if that's the path Konoha has forced us to take, then what other choice do we have? I say we begin planning the coup tonight, a voice from the crowd shouted to thunderous applause. Itachi then stepped forward. Please, father, there may be another way for us to go about this that doesn't require fighting. I'm thinking that this is the only option, Itachi. I know you don't like it, and I'm sorry, but we gotta think about what's best for the clan. Itachi began to speak. I am thinking about what's best for... He was suddenly cut off by Shisui's hand. I understand what you mean, sir, but this really is a big decision, and it's one we might not need to make. Give us one more week. Then on next week's meeting, we can discuss what we found, and if we can't change your mind, then you may begin war meetings, but give us one more try. Fugaku listened, stroking his chin in deep thought. Itachi looked to his father. Please, father, just one more week. Fugaku let out a sigh and cupped his face in his hands. Okay, fine. One more week. The rest of the clan let out a collective groan of disappointment. Shisui and Itachi smiled before offering a slight bow. Thank you, sir, they said in unison. Fugaku looked around at the others. All right, meeting adjourned for the week. Everyone go home and be sure not to talk to anyone about what's been discussed tonight. Slowly, the various Uchiha clan members began to file out of the building. As they left, Fugaku called Shisui and Itachi to him. The two walked over. Be honest with me, boys. Do you have anything that you think is going to change their minds? Itachi looked at Shisui. We have a few ideas. What are they? Fugaku asked. Shisui looked to Itachi and Itachi returned the gaze. We can't tell you, but when the next meeting comes, you'll find out for yourself. Fugaku gave them a bit of a side-eye. Don't disappoint me, he said. You're both dismissed. Itachi and Shisui then began to leave. Do we really need to investigate anything? Itachi asked. Shisui shook his head. So long as we have my Mangekyo Sharingan, we're set. But if we do happen to come up with a good reason why they shouldn't do this, that will help tighten the hold of Kodo Amatsukami. So we should discuss reasons why they shouldn't go through with their plan. Itachi nodded, and so the two went off to speak for a while. They began to take stock in all the good things Konoha had done for them, and eventually the week came to a close, and Shisui would once again meet up with Itachi. Are you ready? Shisui asked. Itachi nodded. What about you? Did you need to cast Kodo Amatsukami on anyone before you got here, or are you set? Shisui smiled. I'm set. Itachi nodded. Good, let's go. The two of them would make their way to the Naka Shrine. Inside, they found most of the Uchiha clan waiting, with Fugaku once again standing at the front. It seemed that they were expected to start the meeting with why they shouldn't go through with it. Good, you made it, Fugaku said. I want you boys to come up here and show us why we shouldn't attempt the coup. Shisui looked to Itachi and nodded. Itachi gulped and began to walk forward with him. As they got there, Itachi began to go over in his head everything they had rehearsed. They began to explain why Konoha formed in the first place, who founded it, and how it helped bring an end to a millennium of fighting. They mentioned how well the Uchiha had been treated, given a strong position of power. And while it was true that there hadn't been an Uchiha Hokage, it was also true that there hadn't been a Hyuga Hokage or a Yamanaka Hokage. There had only been 4 Hokage in the history of Konoha, and while none of them had been an Uchiha, that didn't mean that there would never be an Uchiha Hokage, and that they should strive for one. All the while they were saying this, Shisui was charging up the Koro Amatsukami technique. After enough time had passed, he sent out the Koro Amatsukami, commanding all Uchiha to remain loyal to Konoha and to stop caring about the coup. By the end of their explanation, each of the Uchiha clan members obviously had changed their minds. Even Fugaku was scratching his head while thinking, you know, maybe we are being too hasty with this. We can't forget the good that Konoha has done. I'd say we forget about the whole thing. I'm sure things will get better, not to mention that there's no wonder why they're scared of us. The Nine Tails was used by a Sharingan user. All in favor of forgetting about a coup, say aye. The entire room shouted aye and raised their hands. Fugaku looked at it. All opposed. Nobody raised their hands, nor did they say anything at all except a distant heckler shouting boo at the concept of continuing this plan. Fugaku took a deep breath and smiled. Then, meeting adjourned. Everyone can go home now. Fugaku looked to Itachi and Shisui. Well played, boys. Well played. Itachi and Shisui both then left the facility and smiled. We need to inform Hiruzen of the success of our mission. Shisui nodded. Leave that to me. Just go home with your father and rest. You've been working so hard lately. Itachi would do just that. And for the first time in a while, Itachi got a peaceful night's sleep. Shisui made it to Hiruzen's office and knocked. Come in. As Shisui walked in, he saw Hiruzen sitting by his desk, battle plans laid out on the table. You won't be needing those, Shisui said. We managed to deter the coup. Hiruzen sat forward. You did. It worked. Shisui nodded. Hiruzen then sat back and let out a sigh of relief. That's good. I was afraid we were going to have to send in a strike force. Shisui shook his head. It wasn't without its snags. I nearly lost my Mangekyo Sharingan to Danzo, but in the end it all worked out. The Uchiha are once again at your disposal. Hiruzen smiled. Thank heavens that it's over. After this, things went back to normal. There was no more talk about a coup. As time passed, Itachi finally had time to make good on his promise to teach Sasuke, and proceeded to help him develop his prodigious nature. However, there was one there who did not wish for this to continue. The Uchiha were a liability to his plans. After all, so precious few people could ever hope to control a tailed beast, but among them was no less than the Uchiha. With their Sharingan, they could interfere with the collection of tailed beasts, and with their multitude of Mangekyo Sharingan, there was no doubt that among the many hacks techniques that they possessed, there would be one that could and would defeat him. He needed to deal with this as soon as possible. The masked man would skulk through the village, keeping to the alleyways, attempting to avoid eye contact with people as much as possible. He sought out his own target, Danzo Shimura. Obito had been paying attention to what was going on, and he knew about Koro Amatsukami as well. But Shisui wasn't the only one with similar genjutsu prowess in their dojutsu abilities. A time ago, Obito had replaced his missing Sharingan with one of the many Madara had left in storage. Among the many he had was a Sharingan with a similar ability to Koro Amatsukami. It was so powerful that it could easily take over the mind of a tailed beast. It was how he had controlled the Nine Tails before. He was planning to go to Danzo and cast a new genjutsu over him. One that would make him far less tolerant to the Uchiha. He would sort of meld into the wall of Danzo's room and wait for him to appear. As soon as Danzo did, Obito would appear. Despite his initial surprise, Danzo managed to keep his cool under the pressure. Who are you? Danzo asked. Obito sat on the edge of the desk. I've been called many things, but you might call me Madara Uchiha. Danzo sat there. The look on his face said that he didn't believe Obito for a second, and honestly, who would? Madara had been around for over 100 years, and had died of old age not that many years ago. And even then, Madara was only hanging on by a thread. Almost literally, actually. A life support cable at least. But in a world where ninjutsu ruled and even the dead could be brought back to life, as evidenced by Tobirama's studies, it forced people to stay open-minded about the possibility of this identity. Nonetheless, he didn't wish to stumble across that and bog the conversation down with mindless debating over his real name. He wanted to get down to business that they could both find important. In truth, Obito wondered if he would need to cast a genjutsu at all, considering what he was about to tell Danzo. But in the end, he decided that casting the genjutsu would probably be enough to ensure that Danzo didn't chicken out. Regardless of what you think, an Uchiha I am, and my Sharingan shows you so. But do you know what my Sharingan has shown me? That you've been manipulated without your knowledge. Danzo scoffed. Impossible. Nobody manipulates me. I'm the head of Anbu, as well as Root. Obito gave off a laugh. Are you so sure? What about that one boy? Shisui, Danzo asked. Obito nodded. From what I heard, you were intent to steal his Sharingan for yourself, but suddenly changed your point of view during battle with him. I wonder why. Danzo sat there. Because I decided that I would give him a chance to try and stop the coup on his own. He was heading to a meeting then and there, but he was caught by you. The funny thing is, when he got to that meeting, he could have, but didn't cast Koro Amatsukami. In fact, he had to beg them for one more meeting. Can you formulate any guesses as to why? Danzo was silent. Pieces were beginning to click together. Obito continued. Kodowa Tsukami can only be used once in a 24-hour period. If he didn't cast it there, then it must mean he have already cast it. And the person he cast it on was you. Danzo was becoming visibly angry despite his best attempts to hold it all in and keep a neutral expression. Obito stood. Such a dangerous power does not belong in the hands of just anyone. Shisui alone possesses the power to make Konoha into anything he wants it to be, and the scariest thing about it is that he can do it all without a single soul knowing. Konoha will change to fit his will, and they'll think it was all their idea, just as you thought sparing him that day was your idea. Kodowa Tsukami, Shisui, the Sharingan as a whole, is too dangerous to be left in the hands of the average citizen, especially the citizens with a record of anarchy. For all we know, one might awaken the ability to change the world and bend reality to their whim. And we can't have that, can we? Obito then slipped out of the room. It wasn't hard for him to set things up. After all, deep down, Danzo already knew these things. The Genjutsu was merely to seal the deal. He proceeded to step back and let Konoha sort itself out. Elsewhere, Itachi was out with Sasuke. They had just gone through a little training, and it was obvious that Sasuke was growing tired. But all the same, Sasuke was just a little ball of energy. Itachi himself was amazed at how much energy Sasuke had and nearly envied him. And so he and Sasuke would play a little and bond. Shisui too would be close by, keeping an eye on the two. It wasn't like Itachi needed a babysitter, but he wanted to feel like he was part of the family. After his father had passed from complications to his injuries, Shisui had sort of distanced himself from families. But he had to admit, the concept of having two little brothers made him happy. He didn't want to interrupt their bonding session, but he did want to be close by, in hopes that some of their brotherly love might rub off on him. "Where are you two off to?" Shisui asked. "Home. We're gonna get some dinner," Itachi said. "Would you like to join us, big brother Shisui?" Sasuke asked. Shisui smiled. "I don't wish to impose." "Nonsense. You're welcome to stay and have something to eat if you like," Itachi said. Shisui thought about it. He really didn't want to be a burden, but he really did want to spend more time with the two. Alright, sure, I can stay for dinner." "Yay!" Sasuke shouted. Itachi would raise Sasuke up on his shoulders. Sasuke would get a fistful of Itachi's hair to hold on to, and with his other hand he would point forward. "Onward! To supper!" And so the three began to make their way back toward the Uchiha clan head's household. As they got there, they sat down to eat. They gave thanks for the meal and proceeded to dig in. As they did, Fugaku spoke. "How's your mother, Shisui?" Shisui thought about it. "Last I heard, she was doing fine. The passing of my father was sudden, but it wasn't unexpected. I think she knew as much as I that he wasn't long for this world." "I'm sorry to hear that," Makoto said. "You said last you saw. Do you not live with her anymore?" Fugaku asked. Shisui shook his head. "No, I don't. I used to be the primary breadwinner after my father was wounded, but now that he's passed, my mother gets regular payments due to his service. Just another thing Konoha's doing for us." Fugaku nodded. They continued to eat. As they did, Sasuke couldn't help but tell all the cool techniques and tricks he'd been learning. Fugaku and Makoto were astounded by the speed of his growth, and their faces displayed how proud of him they were. As Shisui sat there and thought about it, he remembered back when his own mother and father made the same faces at him. How sweet were those days. A very simple time. The last time his mother made that face for him was when he had decided to cover all the family expenses in his father's stead. To be frank, he hadn't seen his mother smile in quite some time. Maybe I should go visit her tomorrow, he thought to himself as he continued eating. As the meal came to an end, Shisui stood and prepared to leave. "Aw, are you leaving now?" Sasuke asked. Shisui looked back. "Sorry, Squirt, but tomorrow's my last day off before I get back into the field, and I want to get as much rest as I can between now and then." "Well, why don't you just stay the night with us?" Sasuke asked. Shisui looked back at the entire family as they looked to him. Shisui, in truth, wanted to stay, to be a part of a big family again, but he did not wish to impose. "I don't wish to impose," he said. "Nonsense," Fugaku said. "You aren't imposing. We have a guest bedroom, and if you like, we can even move the beds into the same room. Have a whole sleepover." Shisui thought about it. "I don't know about this," he said. "Please, big brother Shisui, I want you to stay." Shisui lifted Sasuke up into the air. How could I say no to a face like this? Sasuke's face displayed just how excited he was, and his sudden inability to properly hold him told Shisui that Sasuke was ecstatic. He put him down and watched the boy with boundless energy bounce upstairs and get ready to move everything himself. Fugaku followed him. "Slow down, Sasuke, wait for me." As the sun finished setting and the moon shone brightly in the sky, they all settled into their beds for the night. "This is so awesome! Both Big Bro Itachi and Big Bro Shisui having a sleepover with me? How will I ever get to sleep?" Sasuke asked. It wasn't more than a couple minutes later, though, that he was dead to the world. The lights were dim, and Itachi was still up reading a book as Shisui just lay back relaxing. "So tell me, that look on your face during dinner, what was that about?" "What look?" Itachi looked over. "At supper, you had an uneasy look on your face." "Oh, that? That was nothing. I was just thinking about the past." "What were you thinking about?" Itachi asked. Shisui laughed. "I love you, little brother, but I don't remember when that was any of your business." Itachi nodded and raised his book back up. "That's fair." Shisui turned over on his side to face away from Itachi. Itachi spoke from behind the spine of his book. "It's still bothering you, isn't it? Does it have anything to do with your father, perhaps?" Shisui rolled back over. "How did you know?" Itachi shrugged. "Just a random shot in the dark, I suppose." Shisui nodded. "Being around you, Sasuke, and your parents reminds me of what it was like to be in a family again. It's been so difficult since my father passed. No, well, it was hard before he passed. His injury got so bad that he couldn't even remember us anymore. It was like we never existed. I loved him, but sometimes I think it was a blessing that he passed in his sleep. He didn't have to suffer, and my mom, Itachi was still listening to Shisui speak. She was in so much pain, taking care of the love of her life, only for him to look at her and ask her what her name was. A marriage, true love, reduced to unrequited romance, like those you read about in the Uchiha novels or whatever. And after he passed, my mom just stopped smiling. I drowned myself in my work, and so when the village began paying her monthly pension checks for my father's service, I felt she could take care of herself, and I just left." Itachi sat there. He wasn't sure what to say. It was tragic. "I'm sorry that happened, Shisui." Shisui waved it off. Bah. As he laid there, though, he kept thinking back. He really felt like he needed to see her. Slowly, as he thought about this, his mind began to wind down, and eventually he dozed off. Laying there, he had some kooky dreams, mixed with flashes of the Third Shinobi World War. He would suddenly wake up. As he sat up, he realized that the clock said it was about 3 a.m. He laid back and prepared to sleep again, but something felt off. He stood up, went to the corner, found the bucket, and began to relieve himself. He thought about his dreams, but also about something else. For the summertime, the air was awfully chilly. As he finished, he grabbed the bucket and opened the window to dump it, and as he did, he just sort of leaned on the windowsill. He looked out into the night. The sky was overcast, and the moon was not showing. Something felt really off. Not long after, Itachi got up and stepped up behind him. "What is it?" he asked. "Can you feel that?" Shisui asked. "Feel what?" Itachi replied. Shisui continued looking out the window. "Please tell me this is all just in my head." "What's all in your head?" Itachi asked. Shisui looked back at him. "This dread, terror, a sudden unease in the pit of my stomach, like watching a storm coming in from the distance." Now that Itachi was thinking about it, yeah, he could feel it too. "What is it?" Itachi asked. Shisui shook his head. "I'm not sure. I just think that..." Suddenly there was the sound of paper bombs going off in the distance. Shisui was caught off guard. Paper bombs? Itachi peeked out the window. He couldn't see anything. He stepped up on the ledge and climbed to the top. He looked out to see if he could tell what happened. Shisui thought about it. "Perhaps a munitions misfire?" he asked. Itachi shook his head. "No, wait, there's fighting over there." Shisui leaned out of the window as far as his gripping fingers would allow him. He saw silhouettes jumping around, along with the subtle sound of clangs and the distant murmuring of warring people. There he saw more explosions. Suddenly Fugaku came into the room holding a lantern. He saw Shisui at the window. "What's happening?" he asked. Shisui pointed up the road. "There's war happening up on 9th Street. We can hear it and every so often see it. Fighting." "Who's fighting?" Fugaku asked. Shisui shook his head. "I don't know, but I worry we might be under attack." Fugaku sat the lantern down in their room and then proceeded to make his way back to his room to get dressed. "Itachi!" Shisui called. "Itachi!" Itachi peeked down at Shisui. Shisui bid him off the roof. "Get your gear, we're gonna go check on this with your father." Itachi seamlessly flipped in through the window. "What's going on?" asked Sasuke. "Nothing too big," Itachi said. "Just go into mom and dad's bedroom and stay with mom. Me, Shisui, and dad are gonna check it out, okay?" Sasuke nodded. He got up and ran. Itachi and Shisui changed into more combat-ready clothes and grabbed their weapons and items. They then made their way down the stairs. There they found Fugaku waiting for them, ready to go, his shoes already on. Itachi sat down and began putting on his shoes, as well as Shisui began to do the same. Getting their shoes on, Fugaku opened the door. As they stepped out, Itachi noticed Sasuke at the door, wearing his own weapons from training and getting his shoes on. "No, Sasuke, you stay here. You're gonna stick with mom. We live in the clan head's house. If we stay here and the Uchiha really are under attack, they'll be headed here to find us," Sasuke said. "He's right," Shisui said. Itachi thought about it. "Okay then, grab mom and go down to the secret cellar. You know how to get in, right?" Itachi nodded. Itachi pat his brother's shoulder. "Good, now go." Sasuke ran back up the stairs. Itachi and Shisui then joined up with Fugaku on the road. He looked to them and nodded. They began to race toward the battle. They began running along rooftops. It seemed like the other men of the houses, as well as the trained shinobi, began to come out. They saw Fugaku up on the roof. "Clanhead, what's going on?" "An attack," Fugaku shouted down. "What are our orders?" they asked him. Fugaku looked down. "Push the attackers out, by any means necessary." As they looked around, though, they noticed that there was fighting in over half the compound, and by this time, the Konoha police headquarters was already on fire. Fugaku raced with Itachi and Shisui to the battle's center, and there they saw it. The Uchiha facing off against masked Anbu warriors. "Wait, these are the Anbu. Is the leaf attacking us?" Itachi asked. Fugaku's brow furrowed. He rushed in. As they entered the battle, the Mangekyou Sharingan of Fugaku and Shisui began pushing through the Anbu's defensive lines, allowing the Uchiha to flood in from every side, pushing them back. Itachi was proving why he was one of the youngest shinobi to ever be recruited by the Anbu. As they made it through, they continued to push them back, and Fugaku spotted a man he recognized. "Inabi, what's going on?" Inabi Uchiha, one of the Konoha military police force, turned to see Fugaku. "We're under attack. Konoha has turned on us. They came in the dead of night and were only detected because one of our off-duty officers witnessed them on his way home from a late-night drinking binge." "How are we faring?" Fugaku asked. "Not good. There's a lot of them, and they all possess superior training. We're looking at an extermination campaign," Inabi said. "Do you know which roads are affected right now?" Fugaku asked. Inabi thought about it. "Well, there is, or shall I say was, fighting here on 9th Street. I know there's been fighting on 12th, 13th, 16th, 19th, and 21st Streets. The heaviest fighting seems to be on 21st. Shisui seemed disturbed. "Fugaku, sir, permission to break off from the group." Fugaku looked back. "Why?" Shisui's eyes were wide. "My mother lives on 20th Street. She's really close to the fighting. She's all alone. I need to rescue her." Fugaku nodded. "Understood. Take Itachi with you." Shisui nodded. He then turned, signaled Itachi, and the both of them made their way toward 20th Street. As they hopped their way across the rooftops, they realized that the fighting had spread to 17th, 18th, and 20th. The forces of the Uchiha were being overwhelmed. "Hurry, we gotta get there quickly." As they ran, they attracted the attention of a squad of 4 Anbu. They began to throw shuriken at them as they ran. Itachi saw them, as did Shisui. Shisui didn't pay them any mind. Itachi would see them and would throw his own shuriken back, taking them down. As they made it to 20th Street, they could see the house of Shisui's mother. It was on fire, as were many other buildings through there. Just then, Shisui noticed archers on the opposing roof. Shisui ran and jumped through the window, Itachi not far behind. But as Shisui landed gracefully, Itachi hit the floor hard. He let out a cry. Shisui looked back and saw that Itachi had been hit with an arrow in the leg. Shisui looked over the wound. It doesn't look like it hit an artery, and better still, the arrowhead went right through. He snapped off the arrowhead and then gently pulled the shaft of the arrow out. He began applying first aid to help staunch the bleeding to get Itachi back up on his feet. Once he had, Itachi beat into his wound a few good times to numb the pain before continuing on with Shisui. They traveled from building to building, avoiding the outside so as to not draw attention to themselves. Eventually, they made it to Shisui's mother's house. At this point, it was engulfed by flames. Itachi looked at it for a moment, then began forming hand signs. Tiger, ox, tiger, rat. He used water release, water bullet technique. Doing this, he managed to put out quite a lot of the flames, allowing them to get in. Considering that the house was made of wood and used much paper, the damage was extensive. They managed to find Shisui's mother, though she seemed unconscious. Shisui picked her up and rushed out with her on his shoulders. They ran past many fighting Uchiha and Anbu, looking for a place to hide. They smashed through the door of another home where they laid her down. Shisui checked her for any vitals and found none. In a panic, he began performing CPR to try to bring her back, but nothing was working. It was then that Shisui had to face the realization that she was dead, and they couldn't bring her back. Tears in his eyes, Shisui tried to bottle it up. They were under attack. They didn't have time to mourn. Behind them, though, an Anbu agent approached. Shisui turned around and threw a volley of shuriken at him, as did Itachi. The agent was skilled, though, and he blocked them all as they came. Nonetheless, he was felled, not by the shuriken, but by a blade to his back. It was Sasuke. Itachi's eyes widened. "Sasuke, what are you doing here? I told you to stay with Mom." Sasuke apologized. "I'm sorry, I just saw that 20th Street was on fire, and I got worried for Shisui's mom. I was gonna get her and bring her to the cellar, but..." He looked over. "I'm too late." His face looked as if it were about to burst into tears. Shisui walked over to Sasuke and put his hands on his shoulders. "It's not your fault, Sasuke. I was too late too. I know you're sad," and a tear formed in his eye. "I'm sad too. But we gotta be strong. We gotta get out of here fast or they're gonna kill us." Sasuke nodded. It was only now that Shisui noticed that Sasuke had awakened his single Tomoe Sharingan. He gave the boy a hug. "Let's get out of here." The three of them began to escape. They made it to the roof and looked out. By this point, every street was aflame. This was endgame. The battle was turning against the Uchiha. "Where do we go?" Sasuke asked. Itachi shook his head. I don't know." Shisui spoke. "Where's Fugaku?" Sasuke shook his head. "I don't know." Shisui looked back at Itachi and then over to Sasuke before looking around. "We need to hunker down. Let the storm pass over. We gotta get back to the clan head's house and go into the cellar. We'll hold up there with Miss Makoto and wait until things calm down enough for us to escape the village." They began to run their way back to the house, but stopped when they saw the street overrun with Anbu, the house now set on fire. Shisui stopped them. Get back, go the other way." "Which way?" Itachi asked. "Anyway, we just gotta get out of the village, fast, we're fish in a barrel." They began to run in the other direction. As they did, however, arrows started firing around them left and right. Itachi and Shisui jumped across a gap between houses, but as Sasuke jumped, an arrow struck him in the chest, and he hit the wall wrong and began falling down to ground level, where he hit terra firma. Itachi saw this and panicked. He began climbing down to the ground as Shisui turned around and formed the hand signs for the Great Fireball Jutsu. He fired it off and it ate up the archers. He too jumped down there. As he hit the ground, he ran toward Itachi and Sasuke. He looked down at Sasuke and saw his leg was snapped, the bone protruding from flesh. Blood poured from his mouth along with gurgling whimpers. Itachi held him. "It's fine. You're gonna be okay," he shouted as the clouds that once covered the moon now began to release thunder, lightning, and rain. The look on Sasuke's face spoke of fear and pain. He gripped tightly onto Itachi's arm. Mom. I want Mom. I want. His grip loosened as his head slowly began to fall back. Sasuke lay there lifeless. The pain began welling up inside of Itachi and Shisui. To Shisui, Itachi was like a little brother, and to Itachi, he was a little brother. Itachi grit his teeth so hard he felt they might shatter from his skull. But instead of the feeling of the snapping of enamel, dentin, and cementum, he felt something else snap. As his Mangekyo Sharingan awakened, he felt a tremendous power that was begging to be released. He and Shisui both stood. The two of them came together and gripped each other's hands, and suddenly a red Susanoo appeared. Atop the red Susanoo, a green one appeared for armor. It was massive. Atop the Susanoo's head was what looked like a third eye that opened, and as it did, it felt as if two angry hearts beat as one. The Tsukiyomi of Itachi and the Konohama Tsukami of Shisui became one and the same. Together, a new command was sent out to the Anbu within the compound. The Genjutsu showed them Sasuke's death, his final words, and everything. The command then forced the guilt upon them all and demanded that they pay in blood. Each of the Anbu agents, crying out for the Uchiha that they had killed, fell to their knees, begging for forgiveness as they each commit harakiri on the spot. And in a single moment, the battle was over. Itachi and Shisui would both pull out of the Susanoo as it came to ground level. The two would then proceed to mourn over Sasuke. It didn't take long for Fugaku to find them as well. After all, who couldn't miss the massive chakra avatar that forced a whole army to fall on their own swords? But when he found them, he might have wished he hadn't, because there he discovered Sasuke. Cradling his son, tears overflowed from his eyes. Shisui and Itachi could only join in. They sat that way for what could have been an hour or 3. Time was wasted on them. But when they eventually did pull it together, Shisui couldn't help but ask, "What do we do now?" Fugaku looked up. "It's time for a coup." The thunder roared overhead as the lightning lit up the skies. With each flash, a still frame, it seemed, of the Uchiha running across the roof could be seen. Burned in their eyes, visible on their face, deep in their hearts, was the feeling of hatred. Utter hatred. As they moved through the air, the rain pelted them. If their blood wasn't already cold, the rain may have made them shiver. But now, the frost of death was upon their tongues, and it was icing over their blades. It was time for revenge. How many Mangekyo Sharingan had awakened that night? How many people had seen the deaths of their loved ones? Seen their way of life shattered for no apparent reason? Despite possessing what could be considered the best dojutsu in all the village, perhaps the whole world, they were blind. Blinded by hate. Blinded by pain and sorrow. As the rain pitter-pattered on the rooftops, it gave some cover to the oncoming army's footfalls. Just the wind, the inhabitants of the buildings would say. "The storm is ravenous tonight," said the late-to-bedders. There would be rain this night indeed. A rain of blood. Fugaku, Itachi, and Shisui, blinded by their anger, began to make their way toward the Hokage's residence. With it in sight, Fugaku pointed forward. "Try to take that building there. I have something else planned," he said. Fugaku broke off from the group and began to make his way in another direction. Looking back at the residence, their Sharingan could pick up the various shinobi guarding the building. Shisui and Itachi would begin to make their way there, taking only a small squad with them, leaving behind the main meat of their forces as they proceeded to make their way up to the roof of the Hokage's residence. Sneaking through, using all of the techniques they had learned in the Anbu, Itachi and Shisui drew closer to the shinobi performing guard duty. The guards were honorable. Even in the rain, they stood watch. They had been presented water-resistant cloaks, but the cold air was no walk in the park, and yet they persisted, despite the wind and lightning. It was a true tragedy to Itachi and Shisui when they killed them. Finding the guard's entrance, Shisui knocked. "Hey, open up, it's an emergency," he shouted in a voice as generic to Konoha as possible. A voice from within then replied, "Hold your horses, I'm coming. The door opened up and a head peeked through. "What is it?" Suddenly, Shisui slammed the door shut on the man's neck, and Itachi pushed it at an unholy angle until an audible snap could be heard. Opening the door, they pulled his body through. Shisui turned and walked back toward the edge of the roof. He sent the signal to the others that they could now join in. They would rush to the roof where Itachi and Shisui were. They jumped up onto it. They'd begin to file into the building. Surely, at this time, Hiruzen was sleeping. It was 4 a.m., almost 5, and it would not be long until daylight began to shine over the mountains despite the thunderous downpour above them. All the while, Fugaku and his own particular squad rushed down the road. Their open-toed boots were squishing through the mud and puddles of water. Fugaku began to believe that it was inevitable that he would develop a fungal infection, as such environment always seemed to do to him during the Third Shinobi World War. But that was okay, because just as he had all those times before, so too would he do so now. He would relish it, taking it as a reminder of their victory. Fugaku was livid. The anger and pain rushing through his heart right now was insatiable. His son had died. His home had been torched. The fires had burned so hot that there was no trace left of Makoto. Chances were she was dead. If she wasn't, she would have met up with him and the rest of the survivors at the Naka Shrine, the only refuge they had from a second wave of assault. A place where the non-combatants could wait while the village was sorted out. It was safe to assume she had perished. He cursed the thought and wished that it were not so, but deep down he felt like the other half of his heart was no longer in this world. There was some solace in knowing that she and Sasuke would be together, but they who remained on Earth couldn't help but mourn, knowing that they would not see their loved ones again until the day they also passed through those pearly gates. The streets were desolate, not a soul to be seen. Fugaku knew this was for the best. The village was large, and it was doubtful that the whole thing could be patrolled at night. When Fugaku took control of Konoha, he would change that, but only when he had taken control. He rushed down the path with his squad until he reached a small apartment building. He opened the door and made his way up until he reached the desired floor. Together they made their way to a room titled Naruto Uzumaki. Fugaku had been somewhat close with Minato, and Makoto had been best friends with Kushina, so Fugaku truly knew who this kid was. It pained him to do this to the child of the village's hero, but it had to be done. He took some pins and needles and various other things and began the process of picking the lock. Fugaku then carefully twisted the handle. He was slightly worried that Naruto might have some form of security system, but as he opened the door, nothing had happened. Nothing had happened yet. Fugaku began to slide his fingers across the open door's entrance, searching for something that could be the trigger of an explosive, perhaps. He felt a chain. "Back," he whispered to his teammates as he carefully began exploring this new metallic object. "Is this the tripwire of a booby trap? Perhaps the trigger to a bomb or something?" No. Feeling slightly stupid, he called his men back. "False alarm. It's just a chain lock." He began to slowly unlatch the chain. With the door opened, he cautiously stepped in. It was dark. He began to make his way through the apartment. As he did, he found Naruto. He put his hand over Naruto's mouth to keep him from screaming. Naruto did attempt to scream, only for his voice to be muffled by the grizzled and strong hand of Fugaku. Naruto looked into the eyes of Fugaku as he displayed his Mangekyo Sharingan. "Shh," Fugaku whispered, hushing the boy. Naruto felt a sense of relief. It was Sasuke's dad. He would never do anything to put him at risk. Fugaku and Makoto, distant as they were, cared about Naruto. Naruto was safe, wasn't he? The deeper he peered into those Mangekyo, the deeper he felt as if he were falling. It was as if darkness and a crimson sky were overtaking him. He began to wonder if he had dreamt it all up. He felt as if he were in a dream now. In his mind, he felt as if he'd been thrown down upon a stone. Looking up, he saw only the shadowy figure of Fugaku, his Mangekyo burning as the only illumination. "The tailed beast inside of you. We need it." Suddenly, with a cry, Naruto felt his entire body shake. He felt as if bones were snapping, muscles ripping. Bursting up out of his eyes and mouth, a crimson smoke bellowed. It was followed soon after by a roar, and then by darkness. Feeling cold, Naruto felt as if this were the end. His body ached. It was weak and tired. And then, as the moments passed, his body began to grow cold. That was until a warm hand caressed his cheek. A hand unknown yet familiar to him. A face he didn't recognize, but a smile that filled him with hope. a woman with cherry red hair whose gaze declared mothership. Naruto felt his heart release itself from all tension as he hugged her. He was not aware of what was happening in the village below, and perhaps that was for the best. Fugaku, still in the room, struggled to remove the seal, its makeup something nearly unbreakable. That was until he broke it. Fugaku smiled as the beast burst out of the window into the night. He watched as it happened. His smile faded as his gaze returned to Naruto, the boy who would never open his eyes again. Fugaku, in respect to the boy born from his rival and friend, would raise the sheets to cover Naruto's face. The Nine Tails roared into the night as the sound of thunderbolts striking could be heard. Back in the Hokage's residence, the Uchiha moved. Down the barely lit halls, they neutralized any and all opposition that came their way. Shisui would sneak up behind one of the guards, covering his mouth with the palm of his hand, and shove his shoto deep into the man's back, piercing his heart from behind. Pulling the man into a supply closet, he lay him down and closed the door. It would buy them enough time. As the two of them and their small four-man team moved deeper though, they found the door to the Hokage's room. Shisui and Itachi looked to their four-man cell and nodded. The group of shinobi would suddenly disappear, hiding nearby to make sure that the two of them were not disturbed. Itachi and Shisui opened the door. Stepping in, they saw Hiruzen sleeping in bed. The old man was sleeping like a log, and likely had been since no later than 11 p.m., and likely would be sleeping until at least 8. He was geriatric, and despite his motivation, he was too old to do the same things that a younger man might. As they stepped closer though, he spoke. "Itachi, Shisui, what are you doing in my room?" Hiruzen asked without opening his eyes, without turning to face them, without moving or giving any indication he was even awake at all. "How did you know we were here?" Itachi asked. "I sensed you," Hiruzen responded. "I sensed you and the 4 others you brought with you. I may not be a skilled sensory type like others, but I can at least keep track of the chakras within my own home. But that doesn't answer my question. What are you doing here?" he asked. Itachi and Shisui drew closer. A coup. Hiruzen finally opened his eyes and sat up. "I thought you had dealt with that." "We did too," Shisui said, "and we thought that you were pleased with the results." Hiruzen sat there silently. "I was pleased with the results." "Then what changed?" Itachi asked. "Nothing changed. I'm still pleased with your results. Or I was, until you brought your kill squad here to eliminate me. Honestly, boys, I thought you two were on my side in this." "The same could be said of you," Itachi said with a hint of venom in his voice. Hiruzen took a deep breath that he allowed to slowly leave his chest in a hiss. "Something tells me you think I've done something." "You haven't?" Shisui asked. Hiruzen looked over. "What happened?" Shisui began to speak. "At about 3 a.m., we woke up to the sounds of fighting. We went outside to see what it was, only to see that the entire Uchiha clan compound was under attack by Anbu agents. So many people perished, including Itachi's little brother Sasuke and his mother Makoto. The Uchiha compound is smoldering right now, and the people are craving revenge." Hiruzen was stunned. "Wait, the Uchiha clan compound was decimated?" "You didn't know?" Itachi asked. Hiruzen shook his head. "No, I never gave an order." "Perhaps an order you forgot to rescind?" Shisui asked. Hiruzen shook his head. "I had battle plans, but there were no orders issued, and because of that, there were no orders to rescind." Itachi scoffed. "Well, if it wasn't you, then who was it? Who could give such an order to the—" Itachi and Shisui both looked at each other. "Danzo." Hiruzen seemed surprised. "Danzo?" Itachi then questioned Shisui. "Didn't you say you cast Kodoama Tsukami on him to stop just this very thing? Why would he do this?" Shisui shook his head. "I don't know. I cast him under. There should be no way for him to be doing this, unless—" "Unless what?" Itachi asked. "Unless he somehow broke free from my genjutsu. But the only way he could have done that is if he somehow figured it out, which itself is normally an impossibility. The only other way would have to be that someone told him." Itachi was confused. "Someone told him?" Shisui looked to Hiruzen. "Only you knew that I cast it on him, Hiruzen. What did you tell him?" "I told him nothing, Shisui. I don't appreciate that you believe I'm so ignorant to shinobi that I would tell someone under a very important genjutsu that they're under a very important genjutsu." "Well, I don't appreciate that my clan is halfway massacred," Shisui shouted. "Someone is responsible for this, and someone is going to pay." He holstered his kunai. "You're under arrest, Hiruzen. Trust me, this is for the best. The majority of those men out there want you dead. They think that you're responsible for the bloodshed in the compound." Shisui looked to Itachi. "Stay here with Hiruzen. I need to go." "Go where?" Itachi asked. "I need to find Danzo. So long as he's running around giving orders, this coup will turn into a bloodbath." Hiruzen then spoke up. "Say what you will and believe what you may. I didn't have anything to do with this. If Danzo is the one responsible, it's treason. If you wish to find him, the secret headquarters of Root is where he'll be. There's a map in my office hidden in a secret compartment of my desk." Shisui nodded. He turned back to the door and opened it. "Itachi, lock the door and do not let Hiruzen out of your sight unless you want him dead." Itachi nodded. Shisui stepped out. It seemed that while they were busy talking, a few of the Uchiha had broken off to rout the rest of the shinobi from the residence, allowing Shisui to walk about freely. Shisui made his way through the halls and stepped into the dark office. He saw the rain and storm going on outside. The blinds were open, allowing him to see everything. Shisui then began to check the desk with his Sharingan. Within were many objects, papers, and secret documents to be kept, reserved only for the eyes of the Hokage. Among these things was a map. Shisui pulled the map out and looked it over. As he did, he saw where Root's secret headquarters might be. Suddenly, he saw something from the corner of his eye. He looked out and saw a massive kaiju, the nine-tailed fox, the same demon beast that had attacked all those years ago. Within its eyes, though, was the particular look of Fugaku's Mangekyo Sharingan. "So that's what you went to do," Shisui said. As soon as the Nine-Tails let its roar fill the air, lights in each of the homes in Konoha began to brighten up their windows. It seemed this coup was far from subtle, but that was fine. Shisui assumed that it would be hard to get Danzo, believing that he would be well protected. However, he also knew that with the Nine-Tails now on a rampage, and with the obvious failure of the Anbu in the Uchiha clan compound, the only recourse for Danzo would be to send aid to the village proper in hopes of putting down the Uchiha and recapturing the Nine-Tails. Danzo would be unaware that his location had already been leaked by none other than Hiruzen himself. This was the perfect cover for Shisui. As the rain fell, Shisui made his way back to the roof. He looked around and rushed toward the Hokage monument. A steady stream of water fell from above onto the ground below. Shisui ran up the vertical surface, sure to avoid anything that might make him slip and fall. And that was an issue running up a surface that had water rushing down it. It would be easy for him to slip or for his foot to be captured by the rain and dragged to the surface. Once he did make it to the top, he decided to take the long way around to the forest to help ensure that he wouldn't be met by the forces of Root. If even one of them reported Shisui's location, Danzo would issue a full lockdown. So he went the long way. As he came around the mountain, he traveled up a little ways until he found a concrete hatch with a metal lid. He opened it up and began to go down the ladder. Once there, he saw plenty of security cameras and guards. He would see that the bunker went deep and had many tunnels. He was thankful, however, that the pathways were graded. This would allow him to monkey bar his way across. He slowly began to make his way, certain that this would protect him from the cameras and the guards. As he was halfway across, though, he heard shinobi running above, making their way to the hatch, likely to face the Nine-Tails. As they ran, Shisui stopped moving in order to stay quiet. This was made even more difficult by the fact that they each stepped on his fingers as they ran by. He wanted to cry out, but he didn't. He swallowed his pain and kept moving. Once he got through, he continued skulking through the facility until he found the control room. This was the jackpot. He entered, killed the guard, and began searching for the room where Danzo would be. He would see it on camera 10, titled The War Room. Shisui looked at a map and found the room's location. He began to make his way in that direction, going down the many levels until he reached the room where Danzo was said to be. He then stopped. He didn't go straight in. There had to be a better way to do this. One that wouldn't alarm anyone, and that would allow Shisui to know if anyone else were in the room with Danzo. Shisui would go to the nearest closet, head in, and begin working on the air vents. Once he got the screws out, he crawled in. He began to make his way through the vents slowly and quietly until he was just over the war room. He looked in and saw only Danzo. Shisui opened the vent and proceeded to drop down with a kunai. Danzo was struck and seemingly killed. Shisui let out a sigh of relief. He came around the table and looked at the plans. Indeed, it had been Danzo doing this. If Shisui had showed this to Hiruzen as well as Fugaku, maybe they could reach a consensus and return to peace. But right now, what was most important was stopping the battle before more innocent lives were lost. But as Shisui was about to leave, Danzo tossed a shuriken at him. Shisui dodged it just barely, and was surprised to see Danzo standing there as if nothing had even happened. Shisui would then ready his kunai. Looking at Danzo's arm, he saw the many Sharingan embedded within. One of the eyes closed. Izanagi, huh? A cowardly tactic, only reserved for those who can't defend themselves and refuse to accept the outcome of their defeat. Danzo then spoke. What you call cowardice, I call determination. The determination to challenge even fate for the things you desire. And today, I'm not only challenging fate, but you as well. All those days ago, I nearly took those eyes of yours for myself. Today I will, and it will be me who can utilize the Koro Amatsukami that you seem to love to cast so much. Shisui launched into battle against Danzo. Danzo was by far the inferior shinobi, but with Izanagi his stamina was seemingly infinite. There was no way that Shisui could manage to keep this up that long. Eventually Danzo would whittle him down and defeat him. He needed a way to bypass Izanagi, and so Shisui decided to cast Izanami on him. Shisui would go through a certain group of actions before doing the same group of actions again a second time. This confused Danzo at first, but by the time he came to realize it, it was too late. The Izanami was designed to be cast to force a user of the Izanagi to accept their own defeat, but not for Danzo. He was trapped and could no longer cast Izanagi. Shisui, however, would not allow Danzo the opportunity to accept his defeat. Given that Izanagi was no longer active, Shisui would kill him. And as he did so, the color in Shisui's left eye began to go out. Shisui lamented the loss of light in his Mangekyo Sharingan, but at least it was the one that had the 10-year cool-off Kodowa Mitsukami. Shisui began to make his way out of the building. Once he was out, he was back in the rain. As he got back to the village, he looked and saw many buildings on fire, the Nine Tails looming in the background. As he got back though, he opened the door to the Hokage's room where he saw the body of Hiruzen. Standing over it was Fugaku. Shisui was shocked. "Fugaku, what have you done?" He looked at Itachi. "Why did you let this happen?" Itachi shook his head. There was no stopping him. Fugaku then spoke. "This is what had to happen. But this wasn't Hiruzen's fault," Shisui stated. He presented a piece of paper. "This was all on Danzo." Fugaku looked at the paper for a moment. He then looked back to Shisui. "And who was it who put Danzo in power? Who was it who could take that power away? Are you going to tell me that Hiruzen didn't know that Danzo was corrupt?" Shisui stopped and thought about it. He had mentioned that Danzo had planned to steal his Sharingan, and nothing was really done about that. Likely because he didn't wish to disturb the Genjutsu, but then again, even if he had, he could have fired Danzo. Whether Danzo knew or not, there was nothing he could do about it if he didn't have power, and that was all at the discretion of Hiruzen. Fugaku then spoke. "He was guilty by association. He knew what Danzo was capable of and left him in a position of power. And now, the Uchiha are free. With the Nine Tails and with the power of our Mangekyo Sharingan, we will win." Inoichi saw the Hokage's body and felt despair. Fugaku looked to him. "It's time to make an announcement, don't you think, Inoichi?" Fugaku lifted him up and brought him to a command center where he would have Inoichi send out an announcement to all shinobi in the village. The announcement was thus: "Third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi and council member Danzo Shimura have been eliminated. They betrayed the Uchiha clan and all the things which founding Hokage Hashirama Senju stood for. Fugaku Uchiha, clan head of the Uchiha, is now in control of Konoha." The message repeated a couple more times. There was an official declaration made by the council recognizing Fugaku as the new Hokage of Konoha. With his new powers, he then commanded the Leaf Shinobi and the Uchiha to stop fighting. By this time, the rain had subsided. The clouds were parting and the sun could be seen peeking over the horizon. The colossal shadow of the Nine Tails loomed over the entire village as the beast, still snarling, sat down. With all of that said and done, Fugaku would proceed to search for the next Jinchuriki. Itachi and Shisui would be standing on the roof looking over the village. "What happened to your eye?" Itachi asked. Shisui looked down at his hand. He no longer had the same depth perception that he normally would. His Sharingan could make up for that though, allowing him to quickly utilize mathematics to dictate how far or close something was, but nonetheless his vision had changed. He looked to Itachi. As it turns out, Danzo possessed the ability to cast Izanagi. Itachi was shocked. "What?" Shisui nodded. "Remember the rumor we heard that Danzo possessed a pilfered Sharingan?" Itachi nodded. Shisui continued. "The rumor wasn't wrong. In fact, it downplayed it. Danzo had over a dozen Sharingan, each of them lining his arm. With it, he could cast a long stream of Izanagis that would allow him to be functionally immortal so long as his Sharingan were holding out. My stamina was running out, and he looked like he could go on for hours. I had no other choice but to cast Izanami to trap Danzo in a loop. I then killed him." Itachi nodded his head. "I see." Itachi stood there for a moment. "I'm just glad that you're okay, Shisui." Shisui looked over to see Itachi's face fighting to the death to maintain composure. But as the sun was rising and peace resumed, memories of every good thing that they had lost began to fill their minds. Shisui could tell what Itachi was thinking about. He walked over to his junior. "Itachi." Itachi looked up at him. "It's okay to cry." Itachi shook his head. "No, the Shinobi Handbook says that..." Shisui cut Itachi off. "I don't care what the Shinobi Handbook says. We're both Anbu members and I have seniority over you. Consider this an order. Mourn for the lost. Think deeply about Makoto and Sasuke, and let all of your emotions run free." Itachi's lip quivered as the mere mention of their names rent his heart open anew. Itachi fell to his knees, gripping the bars of the roof so tightly that he might ruin them. Itachi saw Sasuke's smile, saw his jovial and upbeat nature, his desire to be a great shinobi like him. Itachi had wished he never started teaching Sasuke. If he hadn't been teaching him, maybe Sasuke wouldn't have tried to follow in his footsteps. Maybe he wouldn't have taken his bow, his kunai, and his other shinobi gear out to fight. Maybe Sasuke would still be alive right now. He thought about his mother, and how she likely burned to death, perishing in the flames. The thought of these two, Two of the people he loved most in this life dying like they had caused him nothing more than heartache and pain. He was fighting so hard against the pain, against the tears. His breathing increased. Shisui knelt down and touched Itachi's shoulder. "It's okay. Don't fight it. It's okay." Suddenly, Itachi saw Sasuke dying in his arms, the arrow protruding from his chest, the cracks in the boy's voice as he craved only to be cradled by his mother once again. He saw the light leave his eyes and heard his final breath escape his lungs. Suddenly, Itachi burst into tears. He took a deep breath, and as he let it out, the breathy nature of the crying became a cry of agony and anguish. That cry echoed out over the village, catching the ears of many. So many had died that night on both sides, and as it stood, it didn't matter who the one crying was, whether it was Itachi Uchiha or any Konoha shinobi. The anguish in his voice carried sorrow with it, causing others to reflect on what they had taken and what they'd lost. In this moment, Konoha knew pain. They understood the costs of war, and many began to wonder if any of this was worth it. So many people began to wonder if it were possible to go back in time, to undo it. Many wished that it was all just a dream they could wake from. The blood on the hands of each shinobi surfaced for them to see, the guilt filling their hearts. And the pain of losing loved ones began to singe the hearts of everyone. Slowly, the entire village began to wail and to cry. And as Fugaku stood there in the Hokage's office, looking over the village he had helped decimate, the feelings grew stronger in him. Shame at being the cause of death for thousands. Young children to old men, innocent to guilty, shinobi or civilian, male or female. And as he did so, he thought about Naruto, first of his victims. Falling to his knees, Fugaku began to cry as well. I'm sorry. Forgive me, please. God, forgive me." In the distance, watching from outside the village, Tobi stood on a branch. Suddenly, Zetsu appeared behind him. "This didn't go according to plan, did it?" Zetsu asked. Tobi shook his head. "I expected that, in the span of a single night, the Anbu would wipe out every last Uchiha, but somehow it was the Uchiha that survived. They were the ones who massacred Konoha. I did not anticipate this." Zetsu's eyes watched Tobi before turning to look back at Konoha. "I suppose it simply means that the Uchiha are far more dangerous than I first imagined," Tobi said. "What should we do now?" Zetsu asked. Tobi thought about it. "We need to set our plans in motion. We cannot let ourselves be bogged down by our failure here in Konoha. The Uchiha clan uprising has severely weakened Konoha to the point that the other nations are once again a threat. While we can't take the Nine Tails right now, we can simply wait for the other nations to finish what we started." "Do you really think this will lead to war?" Zetsu asked. Tobi nodded. "I do. And if it doesn't, we'll just have to make sure that it does." Zetsu seemed to understand the meaning of what Tobi said. Zetsu turned and then faded into the tree from which he sprung, disappearing from sight. Obito stood and looked out over the village he once called home. There was a touch of guilt in his conscience and a solemn feeling that made the day feel sad. Despite everything, these people were still his people, even if he felt that they should no longer exist. He reined in his emotions. There would be no sorrow for them from him. No. So long as his eyes were still on the goal, he would collect every tailed beast and reform the 10 tails. Once he had done this, he could usher in a new age of peace. A peace through dreams in a world where only winners existed, and where nobody had to feel any pain. A world where the Uchiha still existed. A world where he could see Rin once again. A world where, maybe, Obito could be Hokage. Turning around, he began to leave, leaving Konoha to smolder in the distance. Fugaku sat in his chair by the desk of the Hokage. This desk had once belonged to 4 others besides himself, all men who had earned their seat as well as the recognition that came along with it. Fugaku had not been this way. The seat he now held was one he pilfered from the previous holder. He knew that. The entire village knew that. He turned around and looked out over the village, reclining in his seat as he did so. He reflected on all he had gained and all he had lost, the latter of which being a lot and the former of which being far less than he hoped. You see, the village hardly recognized him as Hokage, but merely as a dictator who showed up out of the blue to claim a throne that was not his. The Hokage monument sitting above his office had yet to even begin putting his face on it. Fugaku was having a hard time finding stonemasons willing to add it on. That was the way of things. He was leader in name only, and while the shinobi of the village did as he said, there was an air of sarcasm to it, and a general feeling of uncomfortability. Everywhere Fugaku went, he got the side-eye. People were staring daggers into his back, and he could almost hear them calling him a false Kage. In truth, Fugaku was beginning to wonder if he was right. For as long as he had lived, Fugaku had desired this position, but now that he had it, he was left utterly disappointed. The means by which he had taken this title were not worth the many sacrifices he had to make, but alas, now the Uchiha were in charge. It was Konoha's fault for having sent a kill squad in to destroy the Uchiha. Their hand had been forced. They would have wished to not kill anyone, but they did. They had to. Not a night went by where Fugaku didn't think about it. Fugaku had been feeling really guilty for having killed Naruto. He had felt guilty for killing Hiruzen, especially after boiling over Itachi and Shisui's explanation. So many shinobi died that night, and so few of them actually deserved to. That night had to be the single most tragic night in all of Konoha's history. Blood had not been shed in this part of the land of Dair as much as it had been since the time of the Warring States period, during which the Uchiha and Senju were at war. It seemed that this curse was in their very blood. Their ancestors had fought for blood, and now Fugaku and his children had fought for blood. Unable to hold back, unable to stave off his rage and need to get even after the death of his beloved child, he killed Hiruzen, which had landed them in hot water. The coup, the battle they had waged, had left the village tired out. The Uchiha were nearly destroyed, the Anbu were severely crippled, and the regular shinobi had been eaten up by the rampaging Ninetales. That being said, the Ninetales found its way into a worthy vessel, an Uchiha who had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan during that night. With the best seal he could put on him, as well as the Mangekyo Sharingan, it seemed that the Ninetales was currently under control. But what wasn't under control was the geopolitical climate. Now that it had been reduced to a weakened state, Konoha was nothing but a shell of its former self. It was vulnerable, and the other nations knew it. The Third Shinobi World War had only ended a few years earlier, and now it looked like another might start. The Fourth Shinobi World War. As they spoke, the other villages were poking around territories within the Land of Fire. Every day, the shinobi would be pushed back by the sudden arrival of Konoha Nin. In most cases, the shinobi would simply abide by the commands of Konoha's shinobi and leave the area. It seemed that they were being courteous, but Fugaku didn't expect that to last very long. Fugaku would sit there and wait until Shisui and Itachi returned. "How was the mission?" he asked as he kept looking out of the window. "We found shinobi from the hidden waterfall poking around where we'd been told. We informed them that they weren't allowed to be here, and if they didn't comply, deadly force would be used," Shisui said. "They complied, so nobody was killed," Itachi followed up. Fugaku nodded. This was for the best. So long as nobody died, peace would remain. But therein lay the issue. There was a chance some of the shinobi might panic and kill the opposing enemy, or perhaps vice versa. Perhaps it would be the enemy who would make the first move and kill a shinobi while panicking. Fugaku had been attempting emergency talks with all the other Kage, but they had seemed to stall. He came to realize that war was on its way, and nothing he could do would be able to stop it. So he simply decided to prepare for war. The shinobi of Konoha were beginning to prepare begrudgingly, and Fugaku knew that this would lead to Konoha being weaker than it should be. The council hardly trusted him. It was everything he could do to even get them to convene with him, but what else did he expect? He killed two of their highest-ranking members. He had to turn to his Uchiha council members to pick up the slack. The Fire Daimyo had yet to approve Fugaku as the next Hokage, but also hadn't denied it. So for all intents and purposes, Fugaku was in limbo. The world was balancing on the tip of a spear. It was a real hair-trigger situation, and Konoha's Hokage was basically an empty chair. "I don't know what to do, boys. Were we wrong to do what we did?" he asked. Shisui and Itachi looked to each other and then back to Fugaku. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Fugaku sighed. "I don't have to grant you permission. The very fact you asked for it tells me everything you were planning to say." Shisui then spoke. "Sir, I don't think it was wrong at all for the Uchiha clan to assert itself after what happened. But I do believe that the mindless killing of the third Hokage Sarutobi was a massive mistake." Itachi then spoke. "I informed you, father, that he was not responsible." "He was culpable," Fugaku responded. Itachi nodded. "Yes, he was culpable. What you desired was justice for your people, and that was admirable. But you failed to look at the bigger picture of what such an action could do. I don't mean to criticize you, but hindsight is 20/20, and we can only learn from the past. What we need to do now is calm down and look to the future, and begin to decide what the best course of action is in protecting the village. Even if that action is..." Fugaku looked to him, questioning what he might say next. "Even if that action is you giving up your position as Hokage to a non-Uchiha." Fugaku's face showed no anger, no refusal to listen. No, it showed instead consideration. He focused and looked out the window. "Do you think that would help to unite Konoha once again?" Itachi nodded. "The Uchiha have hurt a lot of people, and we've been hurt. I think personally that what you need to do is make an official report on the actions that happened during the Uchiha clan massacre. Release them and see what the public opinion of these things are. And if they're negative, use them as a reason to step down. If they're positive, see if you can't convince them to support you. That's the best thing I can think of. Fugaku nodded. Who would be Hokage then, if not me? Do you happen to know any powerful people who would work well as a Kage? Itachi shook his head. Shisui stood there for a moment. I think I have one. Fugaku stood there before a camera that was broadcasting to the rest of Konoha. When he was officially stated to be live, he began to speak. About a month ago, the Uchiha clan seized the leadership of Konoha, to which I'm sure you are aware. I feel the need to acknowledge this situation now, and allow you all a say in how your village is run. Fugaku seemed nervous. He had spoken in front of crowds before, but the whole village was a different can of worms. He straightened his papers and continued. At about 3 a.m. on the night of June 25th, the Uchiha clan compound came under attack by Anbu agents. This resulted in a battle that decimated a large portion of the compound and led to the deaths of many Uchiha. This includes my own wife and my youngest son, Sasuke. By divine intervention, the Uchiha clan managed to turn the tide of battle and push the Anbu out. But with the threat of our very existence in the balance, we were forced to take action. That action led to us taking out the head of the Anbu, Mr. Danzo Shimura, as well as the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. We also seized the Nine Tails to aid in our efforts, and utilized Inoichi Yamanaka against his will to send a message. Something that has understandably damaged the relationship between the Yamanaka clan and Konoha. During the course of the coup, I assumed control as the 5th Hokage in an attempt to stabilize the village, but in truth, what I did was for the best of my clan. Can you not imagine what you would do in a situation where you stood loyally with your village, only to have it betray you? At that time, revenge was deep in my heart, as was the fear that inaction could lead to our eradication. We felt as though we had no choice. Fugaku seemed to begin growing emotional as he spoke into the camera. Today is July 22nd. Normally, we would be preparing for my son's birthday, but instead, I'm haunted by the memory of holding him in my arms, watching him perish, the arrow of an Anbu archer protruding from his ribcage. I watched my son die that day at the hands of the village I dedicated my life to. Fugaku cleared his throat to help him regain control of the emotions that were slowly spiraling downward. All the same, I realized that the men we killed that night, in both the Anbu during the compound raid as well as the shinobi killed in the uprising, were all sons of fathers and mothers, and may have themselves been the father or mother of a child who may be watching now, feeling the same pain in their heart as I do. Once more he cleared his throat as he was beginning to fail at keeping it together. I cannot and will not apologize for defending my clan. It was my duty, as it was yours, to attempt to defend the Hokage, and I will never ask you to apologize or disavow your actions. But if I were to apologize for anything, it would be that this coup was not bloodless, and that justice was taken into our own hands instead of the hands of the people. I will not ask you to forgive me, nor will I expect it, but I want you to open your eyes to the pain around you, and realize that the hurt you're feeling right now is the hurt the Uchiha felt, and is the very reason why the coup happened in the first place. Danzo Shimura ordered what we now know was an unauthorized strike against my people, and he was eliminated as retaliation, with Hiruzen being retaliated against due to culpability. The full report will be released to the press in the upcoming days for review of anyone who desires to see it. This includes eyewitness testimony on all sides, pictures taken of the scenes, as well as evidence gathered by an independent source. After this, I will hold a village-wide vote, and every clan that has decided to grace this wonderful village with their presence. This vote will allow you to decide whether you wish for me to remain as 5th Hokage or to give it up to a new Hokage instead. Thank you for your time. God bless the land of fire, God bless its many shinobi, and God bless the wonderful village of Konoha. The address to the village came to an end. Fugaku sat there for a second as memories of Sasuke and Makoto came flooding back. Itachi walked over and hugged his father. Are you okay? He asked. Fugaku nodded. Yeah, I'm okay. Tomorrow would have been your little brother's 7th birthday. Your mother and I even had a present ready for him, and he'll never receive it. Itachi hugged his father tighter. Fugaku had truly been disturbed by this event. It gave Itachi a whole new view of his father. Itachi now knew where he got it from. His peace-loving nature, his desire to protect others, his intelligence and sense of duty. It all came from his father. Fugaku had just been around long enough to become a pessimist, and as time marched slowly, Itachi felt like he too might be becoming a pessimist. How ironic. Itachi had originally set out to oppose his father, and in the course of a single month, he had become him. A few days passed by, and the information released was all the media and news outlets could talk about. Village-wide voting was opened up with the choice to keep Fugaku as Hokage and the choice to oust him in favor of a new one. Fugaku waited patiently in the Hokage's office, watching the results on a CRT TV that hung from the corner of the room. He had it on Konoha News Network, where they were covering the counting of the ballots. It was pretty close it seemed, but Fugaku found himself devoid of care for the results. They counted meticulously throughout the night, and as the morning came, the results were in. The majority of the clans wanted Fugaku gone, and the majority of average citizens wanted him gone as well. It was still a close poll, but in the end the people had spoken, and they wanted Fugaku to step down. So Fugaku addressed the village, spoke and said that he accepted the results and would step down as Hokage, and began searching for a good replacement. Thanks to Shisui, they found one in Tsunade. It took some convincing and maybe a small dose of Kodoama Tsukami, but they managed to convince her to come to the village and accept the position as the true 5th Hokage. The people cheered, and it seemed that the village was slowly reunifying. While the village and the Uchiha were still at odds, things were getting better. Fugaku went back to the compound and found that many of the homes that had burned up had been demolished. Some of the plots of land had brand new houses being built on the foundation, and others had burned out buildings where occupants simply decided to repair instead of replace. Fugaku doubted that his own home could be saved, as it had burned so intensely that barely anything was left. He and Itachi both were surprised to find a brand new building had been built in its place. It had been explained that the Uchiha had come together to build him a new house. Fugaku entered the building and saw how much it looked like the same old house he knew before. And while this caused him to smile, it was a bit bittersweet for him, as he knew that he would not see his wife and child in this house again. "What's wrong?" Shisui asked. Fugaku looked down. "I don't know if I can live here, alone. Not after having had Makoto and Sasuke running around." Itachi put his hand on his father's shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. I'll still be here with you." Fugaku smiled. Shisui then appeared behind them. "Me too." Fugaku looked back. Huh? Shisui smiled. "As it turns out, my own home was never replaced. I have nowhere to live right now and no money in my bank account. Since you're afraid this house is gonna feel pretty empty, why don't we scratch each other's backs? We'll all stay together. We'll party every night. It'll be fun." Itachi laughed. "What do you say, Dad?" Fugaku looked down and thought for a moment. Shisui spoke. "I know I'm not family, and I know I can never replace them, but maybe I can at least make that hole a little smaller. Besides, I have benefits. I know where Danzo kept his secret sake stash. The best stuff you can get, old stuff. Sake that saw the first Hokage. What do you say?" Fugaku couldn't help but laugh. "All right, you've got a deal." And so the three of them partied their woes away. After a large meal and plenty of sake, they were all red-faced. Fugaku sat there with what he had said would be his last glass. He raised it. "This is for Sasuke's birthday. Happy birthday, son. Wish you were here to enjoy it with us. Wish we could be there to enjoy it with you and your mother. And here's to you as well, Makoto. Thank you for loving me like you did, and for making with me the family of my dreams." Itachi and Shisui raised their glasses. "Hear, hear." They all drank it back. They were halfway to passing out, so after this, they decided to just head for their own respective bedrooms, where they proceeded to crash and sleep. The morning came a lot sooner than they would have liked, but there was a call for them all. They all rose up, despite their heads and stomachs screaming at the poisoning of their livers from the night before, and made their way to the Hokage's office. They found Tsunade sitting there at the desk. "This is a fine mess you've left me, Fugaku. Wait, are you drunk?" Fugaku shook his head. "No, not drunk. Hungover. Can you please not talk so loud? My head is killing me." Tsunade shook her head. "This is a fine mess you left me, Fugaku. Just today, our shinobi engaged with shinobi from the Hidden Sand. This has caused the Sand to declare war on Konoha. Other villages have pledged their support as well. This is the 4th Shinobi World War, Fugaku." Fugaku looked at her. "Sorry." Tsunade was dumbfounded. "You led the entire world in what could be the bloodiest conflict since the Warring States period, and all you have to say is sorry." Fugaku rubbed his temples. "What do you want me to say? Please have mercy. I didn't know what I was doing, but I'll single-handedly take them all up by myself? You think I can just call up Rasa and say, 'This is a bad time. Can we reschedule our world war until, say, 2 years from Tuesday?' It's all I can say, Tsunade. The best I can do is offer you my support, but remember, you're Hokage right now, so this is up to you to solve." Tsunade didn't take this comment lightly, and she was sure to give Fugaku a greater headache than he had before. But in the end, he was right about one thing. She was Hokage now, and this meant that she was going to have to be the one to drag them all out of it. As the war went along, this provided the perfect opportunity for Tobi to move in and collect a tailed beast. The first beast to collect, of course, was Shukaku, the One-Tail, the beast of Suna. The One-Tail was currently in the body of a child named Gaara, son of Rasa, the 4th Kazekage. Despite the familial relationship they shared, Gaara was always under attack, and always the victim of assassination attempts that Rasa had ordered. And now that the village was in the midst of a new great ninja war, this meant that they would need the One-Tail. so Rasa was once again putting together a new assassination squad, or so Zetsu had told him. Obito proceeded to infiltrate Suna, kill off, and then take the disguise of one of the assassins. Luckily, it seemed that the shinobi whose persona he had taken up was mute. Perhaps that's why Zetsu told him to choose this one. He wouldn't have to speak, just show up, nod his head, and proceed with the attempt. As it seemed, Gaara had a bad habit of leaving himself wide open. My, you're a confident little murder machine, aren't you? Obito thought as he listened to what they had to say about Gaara. Honestly, there wasn't much that he knew about Gaara other than he controlled sand to a wondrous degree, but he still wondered how it was that even the strongest shinobi of Suna couldn't just off him in a flat second. There had to have been something about him. Was it possible he was just that good? And if so, why in the world would Rasa desire to have him killed? This assassination attempt almost seemed too easy, so why were they trying so hard? Obito, of course, didn't underestimate Gaara. He simply wondered why, a surprise he was interested in learning about. He watched as they displayed the diagram of positions and where everything was supposed to go. Obito would follow them and go to his position, although he didn't plan to do anything. He simply wished to watch. As the moon hovered above the village, it gave the yellow sand in the distance beyond a blue tint, and lit everything up well, despite there being no streetlights. To be honest, the darker part of the village was almost too perfect for an assassination attempt, which almost seemed to give it away. Like, why plan an assassination in a place where people would expect an assassin to hide? Were Suna's shinobi really that incompetent? But then again, Gaara was walking into the trap anyway. Was he that confident? This boy was an enigma to Obito as he watched. Eventually, he made his way down the street until he was in the center of the zone they had agreed on. He stopped moving. The little twerp knows, doesn't he? Obito said with a smile. He began to chuckle. This is gonna be a good show. Suddenly, all of the shinobi rushed out of their hiding spots at once, attacking Gaara. As their attacks drew closer, Gaara would raise a sand shield to protect him, and not a single one of the shinobi broke through. After this, the sand spiked out in an attempt to stab into the other shinobi around him. Gaara would manage to kill 2 of the 5 of them. He would then retaliate further by swinging tentacles made of sand around in an attempt to strike the other shinobi. He would stab through one of them before using 2 of the bodies to smash a 4th into nothing. The 5th and final shinobi gave in to fear and began to panic. He turned around and began trying to crawl away until his foot was grabbed by the sand. He was pulled back in the direction of Gaara. This shinobi's fate is probably left undetailed. Obito watched in curiosity as this boy killed all the shinobi. As the sand fell to the ground, Gaara's position had not changed once. He had simply stopped walking. There was no detection of any emotion, good or bad, upon his face. He simply continued on his way. Obito would ditch his crappy disguise as he no longer needed it and return to the appearance he was so commonly found in, a dark cloak and an orange spiraling mask. He would appear behind Gaara to take out 5 elite shinobi sent by your father. My, how strong you must be. Gaara turned around and looked at Obito silently. Obito continued. I watched the whole thing. Your sand defense seems nigh impenetrable, and your attacks were quick, concise, and without hesitation. Accurate, too. If you watched the whole thing, Gaara said, then you'll know what'll happen to you if you attempt to approach me. Obito was unamused. I would say that your confidence is well earned. Your power's great. Obito raised a finger, but I wouldn't let it go to my head. The sand around Gaara began to churn. Obito started to approach. As he did, the sand now violently kicked up, at first into a dust devil and then into an orb of wind and sand. When Obito drew close enough, he reached out for Gaara. Gaara suddenly disappeared behind a large orb with spikes protruding from it in an effort to stab through Obito. But to Gaara's horror, Obito's hand passed right through the shell, quickly followed by his face. He reached out and gripped Gaara by the throat. He began to choke and panic. He had never once seen an assassin break his ultimate defense. For his entire life, the sand protected him from harm, from pain. But now it was doing nothing, and Gaara could feel the hands crushing his windpipe. Obito began to grip tighter. Eventually, Gaara fell limp, the sand falling to the side. Obito smiled under his mask. You let it go to your head, and now nothing will be going to your head anymore. As the months continued on, the war also continued. But slowly, it seemed that each of the nations began to pull back, retreating to their own villages. This was both strange and unexpected. What was happening? As this was going on, the villages allied with each other began to converse. Chatter began to go up here and there, and spies for Konoha managed to detect some of it. They began to mention that tailed beasts were disappearing from their villages. Before long, every village mentioned that their tailed beasts had been stolen. Tsunade was confused. She began to worry for her own village's Jinchuriki, and then sent a summon to him, telling him to meet with her immediately, but he never came. She sent the Anbu in to secure him, but when they got there, they discovered that he was already dead. Tsunade then offered a ceasefire to all villages to talk about the important issue. When they met, she mentioned that the war opened an opportunity for someone to come in and begin stealing the tailed beasts. With all of the nations at odds with each other, they couldn't warn each other of the threat until it was too late. And now they needed to conglomerate resources, as whoever regathered all the tailed beasts would have more power than any of the nations individually, and might have enough strength to destroy the whole world and usher in a new world order. This information would reach the ears of Shisui, who would go about investigating it. He would head for the Naka Shrine, where he recalled reading something about the tailed beasts. While there, he utilized his Mangekyo Sharingan, which deciphered part of the information on the stone and discovered that the connecting of all 9 beasts could unlock something far more powerful than he had once thought. Thinking back to the last time the Ninetales was used before the coup, he would recall how people had stated that it possessed a Sharingan in its eyes. It began to make sense, and Uchiha truly was behind this the whole time. He would gather information and take it to Tsunade, who would listen to what he had to say. She would be astounded by this discovery and would relay it to the rest of the nations, telling them that there was a shinobi somewhere that had all 9 beasts and was planning to use them to do something that could destroy the world. They all began searching relentlessly. That was until they discovered that there was an odd statue in the middle of nowhere. They would inform Konoha, who would begin marching on it. They found there the statue as each of the tailed beasts were being loaded into it. Zetsu turned around. "They've arrived," he said. Obito looked back. "Take over for me, Zetsu. Load up the tailed beasts." He turned around to face the army. As he did, he pricked his finger and touched the ground. Summoning jutsu! Immediately, he was surrounded in battle-ready Zetsu. He commanded them to charge. Tsunade saw this and was dumbfounded. She commanded her own army to charge as well. They rushed down into battle against each other. Itachi and Shisui stood there. They looked down upon the battlefield. They saw Obito down there, but that wasn't their target. Shisui pointed towards Zetsu. "That guy, there. He's doing something with the tailed beasts. We need to take him down first. If we do, whatever they're planning will grind to a halt." Itachi nodded, and so the two of them began to make their way around the battle the long way and at a distance. They then approached the Geto statue from behind. Once they began to slowly sneak around it at opposing sides. They peered around and saw Zetsu. Shisui and Itachi locked eyes for a moment, and Shisui nodded. The two of them then rushed from behind the statue, and Black Zetsu would look left and right at Shisui and Itachi coming in. He would jump back and away. He'd begin to utilize wood release to defend himself, and as he did, he attempted to stab them with the tree's limbs. But Itachi and Shisui dodged them before responding with their own attacks via their Shoto. Zetsu managed to avoid all their attacks with the Mayfly technique and appeared again behind them. He utilized his wood release to grip both of their legs in vines. "Pathetic. You thought such an attack would work on me?" He weaved the hand signs for a fireball ninjutsu, but as he breathed it, suddenly it was his body that was eaten up by flames, not Itachi or Shisui's. "What?" Suddenly, the world around him would fade away as the rising moon in the background bore Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan. When Zetsu came to, he had not moved from his position, but instead was being eaten up by Amaterasu's flames. He looked up in terror as Itachi stood above him. "Pathetic. To think that such an attack would work on you." Zetsu burned away to ash. But to the horror of Shisui and Itachi, the Geto statue began to mutate. It seemed that in the last moment, Zetsu managed to seal the last of the tailed beasts. The statue became the 10 tails. Itachi and Shisui began to retreat. Obito looked back with a smile. "The 10 tails, it awakens!" He suddenly tossed his mask to the side and utilized the Rinnegan he managed to pilfer earlier to seal it into himself. He rose up into the air. As he regained control, he began to effortlessly decimate the rest of the shinobi on the field. Shisui and Itachi attempted to attack him, but were both easily pushed to the side. They tried their best to cast Genjutsu, but Obito was resistant. Itachi tried to cast Amaterasu, but the attack was absorbed by the Predapath. With little left in their repertoire, they then attempted to utilize their Susanoo in battle against Obito. They fared better this time, but it wasn't quite enough. Obito remained stronger and managed to throw them back. "What are we supposed to do?" Itachi asked. Shisui thought about it. "If we unite our powers, like we did during the night of the coup, maybe we'll be strong enough." Itachi and Shisui then began attempting to utilize their Susanoos in conjunction with each other. This gave them an increased power boost. They began to strike out at and attack Obito, who was now, finally, after so long, taking damage from their attacks. Despite this, they were still pushed back. It had become a battle of attrition, and Obito had infinite stamina through the 10 tails. Itachi and Shisui did not. They needed an extra boost. Itachi looked back. "Dad!" Fugaku rushed to their side. "Layer your Susanoo on top of ours. Give us your strength." Fugaku nodded. He bonded his blue Susanoo as well. It bore the weapons of all the Susanoo, including the Yara Mirror and the Blade of Tatsuka. With that mirror, the Susanoo managed to block attacks that any of their Susanoo alone would fail to protect against. Once Obito's defense was broken by the perfect parry to his attack, the Susanoo shoved the blade of Tatsuke into the chest of Obito. With that, the blade managed to pull Obito in while separating him from the tailed beasts, and with that, the battle came to a close. With the entire world being tired from their war against the Ten Tails and its Jinchuriki, they agreed to an armistice to end the fighting. The tailed beasts would be returned to their respective villages and everything would become peaceful once again. As the sun set over the Uchiha compound, Shisui and Itachi watched from the upstairs window. "This is not at all how I planned things would go," Shisui said. Itachi laughed. "Yeah, for me, I expected that all we would need to do is cast a genjutsu and everything would be fine. But instead, it expanded into a massive international incident." Shisui thought about it. "I feel like if Danzo hadn't tried to take my eye, our families would still be here." Itachi pat Shisui on the back. "That wasn't your fault, and it wasn't mine either. We did what we had to do. If anyone's to blame, it's Danzo." Shisui smiled. Itachi then turned around. "I'm going downstairs to get something to eat. You want something?" Shisui nodded. "Sure." As Itachi left, Shisui took one last look into the setting sun, and as he did so, he could have sworn that he saw the faces of his mother, Sasuke, and Makoto smiling back. "You coming?" Itachi asked. Shisui turned around. It had been a hard year, but it had all turned out okay. Despite having lost sight in one eye, he was still doing well. Now, it was time to celebrate. "I'm on my way." This video was one of the ones I loved writing the most. Despite the fact that Shisui got to keep his Mangekyo Sharingan, it's a thought that is often overlooked that there was a chance this could fail. And with Obito seeking to sow discord in Konoha and the world to cover his tracks, it only makes sense that he would try to undo everything Shisui and Itachi did. And from that, we got to explore a world where the Uchiha's coup actually succeeded. I have to admit that in a lot of my what-ifs, I portray Fugaku in a real negative light, so it was refreshing to portray him as he likely would have been. A reasonable man only doing what he felt his duty was. Anyways, if you enjoyed the movie, be sure to let us know in the comments below what other stories you might want us to tell, or what other series you might like to see become a movie. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when our other videos drop. And here are some other videos if you still feel a little bored. I'm sure you'll find them entertaining. Until next time, peace out.